Hello and welcome to our new series, Attain Explains. You're starting to see a lot of organizations doing this because we haven't had a chance to really connect with our donors. And so this is an awesome way to kind of keep you informed on what we're doing. I'm Kathy Fleming. I know most of you, and I want to say how I appreciate you joining us today to learn more about what we're doing out there. We're doing a lot of work in especially rental assistance, which is our topic for today. And so I can't wait to hear from our speakers. So I'm going to turn this over to Eric, and he's going to tell you about what to expect from today.
Thanks, Kathy. So yes, I'm Eric Sanford. I'm the Communications and Donor Development Specialist for Attain. I'm going to be the host and moderator for this Attain Explains series. If everyone could remain on mute until the Q&A section, that'd be appreciated. So, as Kathy said, we're doing this as a way to keep folks engaged and also to give you kind of more of an inside look into how our programs work and how we help out homeless and at-risk families on the East Side as they recover from homelessness and help them rebuild their lives and get back to stability or avoid homelessness in the first place, which is our topic for today. Basically, as Kathy said, we thought it would make sense to start the series off with a session on the rent debt crisis that our whole country is going through. But particularly how it's affecting folks right here in our own backyard in King County and on the East Side. So our stable home program has been, exploding in terms of money out the door and to help families avoid eviction. But some folks out there might be wondering how this all works during an ongoing eviction moratorium, and what can people do to avoid rent debt, and how are landlords with mortgages to pay on rental properties making all of this work? So to help give you a better understanding of the situation, we got two speakers here today who are in the thick of these matters right now. First, we have Marilyn Littlejohn of the Dispute Resolution Center of King County, and she'll be giving us a look into the eviction dispute resolution process, and also a bigger look at a big picture look at rent debt and evictions across King County. And then joining us is our own Greg McLeod. He's Attain Housing's program services manager, and he oversees both our transitional housing program and the stable home program. So you'll hear from both of them, and then you can put your questions into the chat window at any time as they come up, and we'll gather those and we'll save them for a Q&A session after both Marilyn and Greg have a chance to do their parts. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I'm going to send it over to Marilyn. Take it away.
Thank you, Eric. Hello, everybody. I hope you're having a nice afternoon. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for inviting me. Let's do this. I am a case manager at the Dispute Resolution Center of King County. I've had over 25 years experience in human services in the county in various roles, and I'm glad to be able to spend a little time with you. I have put up my PowerPoint presentation, and you'll get a copy of it afterwards if you would like. So I'm going to talk about rent debt in King County, specifically about eviction filings in 2019 to sort of create a context for the current situation we're in, then talk about what's going on in the county regarding rent filings during the pandemic, a little bit about the moratorium itself and how it works, and about the eviction resolution program itself and how it works and how it's trying to help people. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about my agency, but just know it's a community-based agency that helps people resolve conflict. in a number of areas. And one of the key areas right now has to do with eviction and helping people come up with payment plans. And I'll say more about that in a moment. So what's happening in the county? So I decided just to share some numbers with you beginning in 2019. You may not have know this, I didn't know this, but in 2019, almost 4,500 evictions were filed in Superior Court. I am not telling you how many evictions were approved because it doesn't really matter. It does matter, but it's not the only thing that matters. As if you get a filing of an eviction on your record, it will follow you, whether or not that the landlord is able to evict you. Just having that filing on your record can impair your ability to rent another place. And so in 2019, we had almost 4,500 cases filed. 70% of those occurred in just 5 cities. And we know that one of them is Seattle. The others are Kent, Federal Way, Renton, and Auburn. I don't give you much data, but I will say to you that Kent, Federal Way, Went, Auburn, each of them, the rental housing percentage of their cities constitutes anywhere from 3 to 5% of the total percentage of rental housing in the county. So they're disproportionately, the people there are disproportionately impacted by eviction. Next, I'll say that in 2019, almost 90% of the cases filed were for non-payment of rent. 4% was for a violation of lease or some behavior that was inappropriate for apartment living. In terms of race issues, tenants filed against, 40% of them were white or Caucasian. And we know that the majority of the population in King County is white, 60%. 34% of those who get filed against are Blacks and African Americans, while in the county, only 6% of the population is African American. So a disproportionate number of African Americans are adversely impacted by eviction. So in 2020, we were faced with a pandemic, COVID-19, which put people out of work as well as other adverse consequences. Health, social life, economic well-being. And around a year ago, a little more than a year ago, the governor imposed a pandemic which prohibited landlords from evicting people who could not pay their rent due to COVID. There were 3 exceptions to this, and the 3 have to do with whether or not the landlord wants to move into the property himself or herself, whether or not they want to sell that property, or if they can prove that the behavior of the tenant causes a significant and imminent risk to the health and safety and property of the neighbors there. The other thing that cannot occur during this moratorium is that they cannot raise the rent. They cannot send the rent owed to collection, nor can they charge late fees. They can't do all this. However, the tenant is still responsible for the rent owed. And so what is it looking like in 2020 or during the pandemic? I'm showing you here the numbers for 2019 so that you can compare them to what we're experiencing during the pandemic. Okay? So the number of evictions filed during the pandemic so far is about 8% of what it was in 2019. The same cities make up most of the filings. The one thing that's added is unincorporated King County. A lot of people in unincorporated King County are experiencing filings due to eviction or eviction filings. Now, almost 90% of these filings in 2019 was due to non-payment. We know that non-payment of rent is not a reason to evict. So 2% of the evictions that we have experienced are due to non-payment of rent. So what are the other reasons people are getting evicted now? One is because the owner wants to move in or occupy the rent. Remember, that's one of the exceptions to the prohibition against evicting people. The other major reason is has to do with lease violations or behavior. And in 2019, it was 4%. In 2020 to now, it is 34%. So a lot of people have avoided eviction or receiving a filing for eviction. What's going to happen once the moratorium is lifted? Landlords are going to file for eviction. And there's a big gap. We expect a huge number of people to be at risk. And the Superior Court wants to help people avoid these filings. So the court system in Washington State and in the Superior Courts of the state proposed and developed this program called Eviction Resolution Program. And it provides 3 services to help people who may be at risk for eviction. One is rental assistance. The federal government and the state has made and will continue to make dollars available to help people pay back the rent that they owe. And this is usually made available through the county, United Way, and community-based organizations in partnership with the county or United Way. The second service is what the DRC, my organization, does. We help tenants and landlords negotiate a reasonable payment plan. And reasonable is defined in terms of the tenant's financial situation. Do they have income? Do they have access to rent assistance? We can also help them deal with other housing instability issues. And lastly, there's legal assistance to help tenants who actually face eviction for one reason or another. And the primary provider of that service is the Housing Justice Project, which is a program of the King County Bar Association. So how does this program work both during the moratorium and after the moratorium is lifted? During the moratorium, participation in this program is completely voluntary. Neither tenant nor landlord need to participate. After the moratorium, the landlord must give the tenant the option to participate in this program. They must give the tenant access to rental assistance and or mediation of the payment plan. after the moratorium is lifted, the landlord can pursue an eviction only if the tenant chooses not to participate in the eviction resolution program, or they try to mediate a payment plan, but they can't come to an agreement about what a reasonable payment plan is. Okay. Now, so during the moratorium, this is voluntary. After the moratorium, after the eviction moratorium is lifted, it becomes mandatory. Why should anybody, especially the tenants, participate in it now? And remember, if you don't know, the moratorium, we've been in a moratorium since March, and it is now scheduled to end June 30th. Well, a reason for people to voluntarily participate, if they can, is because there are going to be thousands of people in line trying to deal with and avoid eviction. So they need to start now when they can to access rent assistance. And if they have income sufficient, they can negotiate a payment plan. And one of the reasons to do it now also includes that they'll have only a limited number of amount of time to negotiate a settlement with the landlord, the tenants will. Because when the moratorium is lifted, they are subject to 2 notices from the landlord. One is for 14 days. The second one is for 10 days. So they have about a total of 24 days to come to some kind of agreement with their landlord to resolve their rental arrears before the landlord can pursue an eviction filing. Okay. Now, it's really important that tenants understand their financial situation when they consider moving toward a payment plan, because if they enter a payment plan and they default on it, the landlord can move toward an eviction. So they need to understand their income and how rental assistance work. The last reason for tenants to pursue this conversation with landlords is that landlords are afraid that tenants will run out on them, skip town, do things that will further damage their economic well-being. The economic well-being of the landlords and property owners is as adversely impacted by the pandemic as the economic situation of tenants. So by initiating the conversation now, they are demonstrating good faith and working on developing stronger relationships with their landlords. So I'm going to conclude by just sharing some information, contact information of the dispute resolution, the Housing Justice Project. For people who live in East County, the Eastside Legal Assistance Program is someone they can talk to. And then there's rent assistance from the county as well as through 211. And at this point, I'm going to stop because I think you're going to ask questions after Greg gets done.
Yes,
correct?
Thank you so much, Marilyn. Yes, so that was very informative, and we're going to make these slides available to everyone. I'll send that out after the fact here, and yeah, thank you. That was very informative, Marilyn, and we'll do some questions after Greg talks here. So, Greg, if you're ready to take over.
Sure. Thanks.
All right.
And thanks, Marilyn, for the work that you're doing. Really appreciate it. And thanks for coming today. So I've been with Attain for about 6 years. I'm the program services manager. And before that, I was a case manager, and I'll be speaking kind of about our experience with our eviction prevention program called Stable Home. I also help facilitate the transitional housing program. And so some of that might trickle in here as well. But, we're talking about the rent debt crisis. So I'm going to try and keep it to that. But we at Attain know that an eviction on people's records can make it harder to rent than many felony convictions. And many evictions can be avoided for less than a couple $1,000s. And so when we're thinking about, the cost on the system of someone experiencing homelessness, that's a drop in the bucket. So our Stable Home program is meant to help people avoid eviction when they're in danger of losing their housing. Not to mention the stress of an eviction that and homelessness that can have on a family. So this isn't a new issue. I was kind of introduced to eviction prevention through while I was a case manager with Attain, and was asked to help out on that program. And when I was first introduced to it, there was still a big need on the Eastside, but the numbers were a lot more manageable. So between 2017 and 2019, our eviction prevention program grew by 145%. And that was tough to handle. And then between 2019 and 2020, that program grew by 500%. So it really became overwhelming. There's kind of some typical stories that we see through Stable Home. When I was first introduced to the program, a lot of the stories that we heard were a single income family, living paycheck to paycheck. They suffered a crisis that set them back a month, and just like that, they were at risk of homelessness. Or another typical story that we heard was a 2-income family without a whole lot of savings, but they were doing okay, and a spouse died, or there was a DV incident, and the household became a 1-income family. And I've personally known many people in these situations. These aren't folks who are irresponsible. They're hardworking, and circumstances just made it difficult for them. And so, through work with that program, we hear story after story after story like that. So yeah, thank you, Carol. DV is domestic violence. Sorry, sometimes I slip into acronyms. The kind of newer story that we're seeing throughout the pandemic is a multiple income family living in market rate housing with substantial savings, right? Somebody who had planned for the future. And then unexpectedly went to a 1-income family due to COVID, whether that was an issue with childcare or complications to their employment due to the pandemic. And they were able to make it work for 6 months or 9 months because they were drawing on savings and they were hopeful that they were going to get back to normal. But it just kept drawing out, and they eventually had to ask for help. So these folks were not low income a year ago. These folks were just like you and me. They planned for everything. They planned for eventualities, and then the unexpected happened. This can happen to so many of us, and so it's interesting. We see both of those stories, both of those types of stories coming in these days. One of the things that we're seeing more of these days is folks owing multiple months' rent, and so those debts are kind of becoming bigger, and many times it's more than one agency can help with the loan. We've been working really hard lately to make sure that our partnerships are on point with area agencies, and we're able to coordinate on a lot of that stuff. So the Bellevue Dispute Resolution Center, we're talking a lot with them. Marcy at the Bellevue Dispute Resolution Center does a lot of work similar to what Maryland does, but they kind of handle Bellevue and Kirkland. And so we're meeting with them on a regular basis. We're meeting with Bellevue LifeSpring, HopeLink, St. Vincent de Paul, Solid Ground, all these agencies doing similar work. And we're meeting on a monthly basis to make sure that we're coordinating some of these issues, and then updating each other on where we're at as far as funds and capabilities are. So in 2020, Marilyn mentioned the King County Eviction Prevention Program that was launched to kind of roll out some federal monies to help people avoid evictions. And we saw that there wasn't really many agencies stepping up to participate in that program from the Eastside, so we volunteered to participate in that program. That program underwent a few changes during the months that it was operating in 2020. One was initially they were helping with, I think it was 3 months of back rent, and they quickly saw that wasn't going to cut it for a lot of people, and they were having a hard time kind of greenlining that money, and also getting landlords to agree to the terms based on that money. And so they had to bump that to a 6-month period, a 6-month chunk. And with that, we were able to kind of get moving a little bit quicker. It was a lot of work, but we helped a lot of people. And that program is going to be launching again here in 2021 with a new batch of federal money. They're expecting to spend more money and help more folks, and they also have bumped that period from a 6-month chunk to up to 12 months, from my understanding, which is awesome. But we also know that based on the numbers, there are more folks that are going to need help than that program is going to be able to serve. And so there's a need for all of us to be participating in this. It's a lottery system, and so what the tenants will do is they'll kind of fill out the form and submit their interest. Then someone will contact them if they're selected in that lottery, and they'll do that until they've spent the money that they have allocated for that program. There are a number of folks left over from 2020 that weren't selected for that lottery, and so that hopefully they will be addressed first. But that pool continues to grow as the pandemic has gone on. So 2021 for our stable home program, it's no different than 2020. I mean, we're just seeing the need is growing and growing. We get a little bit of help from our partner cities, our local cities, and we got some money from Bellevue for 2021 and 2022. We spent the full amount that Bellevue gave us for the whole year in the first quarter. And so, I mean, the need is there. And we've actually had to pinch off Bellevue just a little bit, which is a tough thing for us to do, because we answer the phone every time and listen to people's stories, and it's really difficult when we have to kind of point them somewhere else. But through the partnerships that we've developed with our providers meeting, we're able to do some of those warm handoffs and try and make sure that they get somewhere. So for those folks that owe huge debts, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, one of the things that we're suggesting folks do before we consider an application is that they're contacting one of those dispute resolution centers and working out a payment plan with their landlord, so that it's not just this insurmountable debt, $20,000. We can break it down into a chunk where some assistance is going to help them get started, and then they'll be able to pay their rent moving forward and make a small payment on top of that. So I mean, all these pieces kind of work together to help people move forward. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about really quickly is the governor has done a really good job of taking a look at what's going on with evictions, with people who have a bunch of rent debt, and kind of extending the eviction moratorium. But one of the things that's happened from our perspective is as the moratorium's been extended 3 times, I think, and Marilyn's nodding her head yes. And at the end of each one of those moratorium periods, what happens is everybody panics right? So our phone lines go crazy, everybody's freaking out, I'm going to be evicted, and then it's extended again. And so we see it quiet for a while, and then everybody freaks out, and then quiet for a while, and everyone freaks out. And so hopefully what we've done is we've kind of filtered through some of those debts, so people aren't just burying their heads in the sand and saying maybe it will just go away, right? They're actually kind of addressing those things as it goes on. But the stress of that has been intense, not only for tenants but also for agencies, when we just see like, oh my gosh, here we go. And Marilyn and Marcy at the Bellevue Dispute Resolution Center, I'm sure, are feeling the same pressure that we are. When it finally comes to an end, holy moly, we're just going to be staring down the barrel there. So all we can do is our best, and continue to kind of try and coordinate our efforts and make sure that we're educating the public and trying to get in front of this thing. So I think that's about all the time I have for that.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for giving that perspective there, and kind of showing how Attain Housing is trying to help folks make a plan for dealing with their rent debt and everything. So yeah, let's go ahead and move into the Q&A section here. I got a question here for Marilyn. Maybe primarily she could start, and if Greg has anything to add. So in your presentation, Marilyn, you mentioned the 3 exceptions that landlords can use to file for an eviction currently during the moratorium.
Mhm.
And I was just curious, like, are you seeing any instances during the dispute resolution process where it seems like landlords are kind of stretching those exceptions or abusing them at all? Or is that something that gets thrown out early on in the process before it goes to court, or if it doesn't seem like a legit complaint, or how does that work?
Well, first, that's a really good question. And I want to say that as a mediator, because I am a trained mediator, we are independent. We are nonpartisan, so we don't take sides and we don't give advice. If you really want the answer to that, you should probably talk to maybe the Eastside legal assistance program in your area, because they will have their hands on that pulse and they will know what is going on from a legal perspective. But I want to point out 2 things to try to answer your question. One of the reasons I showed you 2019 and what's happening in the moratorium is to sort of answer this question indirectly. In 2019, you did not see any evictions, any eviction filings due to a landlord wanting to sell or occupy the space. 0. During the moratorium, I don't remember if it was 40 or 34% of the, what was it?
I think 45%. That's what I wrote down.
Let me look at my notes here. Yeah, 45% of the evictions filed, and the number of evictions is down, which is what should be. But 45% of the evictions filed were due to landlords or owners wanting to occupy or sell the property. So there is, and I am hearing it from attorneys, there is some concern that landlords are turning to this as a way to deal with their own financial crisis. And again, I want to say, the landlords have a financial crisis as well as the tenants. So there is some indication of that. And there is also some indication that they might be using the health and behavior, imminent threat a little more than usual as well. because that went from 2% to 34%.
Mhm.
But these are difficult times.
Mhm. Thanks, Marilyn. Did you have anything to add to that, Greg, at all? No.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Do
Cool.
you see this happening, Greg, among your tenants?
I mean, the thing that we see a little bit is you know, just kind of like a little bit of a back and forth with the landlord. Whereas, you know, if we're going to be assisting somebody or proposing some assistance, the landlords are really hesitant about accepting assistance right now. They really want to dig in and learn, like, okay, what does this mean? What am I signing? You know, and I understand that, right? You want to make sure that you're dotting all your I's and crossing all your T's before you're signing anything legally. But you know, especially when we were working with the eviction prevention program with King County, some of those chunks were tens of thousands of dollars. And so the landlords were like dragging their feet a little bit. And we're like, hey, we just need you to sign this piece of paper and we can send you a $25,000 check. And they would just keep sending us email after email. And it kind of, you know, I mean, they weren't saying it outright, but it seemed weird, right? And then we would have to kind of kick it back and say, can somebody else talk to this person? Because they're turning down $25,000. So.
Yeah, I think what folks may not know is that in some cases, to get rental assistance, the landlord has to forgive some of the rent owed, and they may or may not want to do that. The other thing is, to get rental assistance doesn't mean that, I mean, that pays back the rent owed, but they still owe future rent. And
Right.
one of the beauties of the new program that's getting launched is that the rental assistance will pay for up to 9 months of the arrears, as well as up to 3 months of future rent.
Right.
So that people who are still trying to find jobs have an opportunity to remain stable in their homes, moving ahead.
Good clarification. And yeah, that particular stipulation was very specific to that King County program, that, you know, the landlord had to sign off on any debt that wasn't covered under that agreement. Most of the agencies that we work with on the east side here are just addressing one particular part of it. And the language on the agreement that we asked landlords to sign is that based on this assistance, you agree not to evict this person for this month, right? Rather than, you know, talking about a 6-month period or forgiving a month or two of debt. So yeah, it really was kind of an interesting predicament that we had with that program. And I'm glad to see that they're trying to address that.
Great.
I have,
yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go ahead. No, please.
No, go for it.
So a part of my sordid history is that I'm a recovering lobbyist. I was a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. for a couple of decades. And so this is the place from which that comes. Is there within the, I mean, do we know if in the Realtors Association, or if there's a land, you know, property management association that you all could connect with and do some education and say, here's the deal. This is not like a fast one we're pulling on you because we want to give you money. I'd just be interested, because it seems to me that those are the kind of people that would have sort of the credibility, and they'd have enough of a relationship with, that they'd turn to them as the honest brokers.
Well, I can offer you 2 bits of information. The eviction resolution program was developed by a coalition of organizations at the state level. And at least one, and so one of them was the Washington Multifamily Housing Association, which is the trade association for all the large landowners or property owners in the state of Washington. And they have been instrumental in developing the eviction resolution program and in the current legislation at the state level around how to expand it. That's one piece of information. The other piece of information is that I've actually done a webinar with the members of that association at the end of March. And they had some good questions to ask. And we can learn from them as well. So that the Multifamily Association, the Rental Housing Association for the smaller property owners, both are involved in helping their tenants and helping their landlords and property managers understand what's going on. And in my experience, limited as it is, most property managers want to help their tenants.
Mhm.
And they're doing what they can.
Thank you.
It's a good question, and there were kind of two main aspects of that eviction, the eviction prevention and rental assistance program that King County was facilitating and is going to be facilitating again. You can access that lottery as an individual tenant, or you can access that lottery as a landlord. And so those landlords who are accessing that they kind of understand what's happening. So it's not a shock when they get the proposal, because they were the one that initiated that. But we also see from our program, those property managers and programs that we have an existing relationship with, it's pretty cut and dry. You know, they know what the deal is. You know, we have an ongoing dialogue with them. And so if there's any other questions, they can just shoot an email and say, hey, is this right, or whatever. And so, you know, we definitely see the benefit of kind of making sure that if there's a property manager or a landlord that we're dealing with fairly regularly, that we have some open lines of communication there, because it just makes things so much smoother for the tenant.
The last thing I'll say is, if you know landlords who have questions, they could also call the DRC, because we do a weekly info session just for landlords. And I think it's Wednesday afternoon. But I think on my information on the last page, you'll see how to contact us. If you contact us, we can help. Landlords can contact that, and we'll give them information as well.
Great. Thank you. Thank
That's
you for that.
Great. So I'll throw another question in here. It seems like we're kind of have hinted at this a little bit so far, but are landlords getting any relief from sources, you know, other than what we're talking about here? Like, is the state government or federal government playing any role in that, or anything else out there?
The only thing that I'm clearly aware of is what Greg has said. The CARES Act money pools, or significant chunks of the money coming down, and are being set aside for landlords of multiple units, as well as landlords for smaller units, and then for tenants themselves. So the money is being funneled to landlords specifically, as well as to tenants.
I see.
And the way that the money is working for that particular program is it comes from the federal government to the state commerce department, and then the commerce department distributes that to the counties, and then the counties distribute that through partner agencies. So King County obviously has gotten the biggest chunk for Washington State, for both what they were calling EPRAP 1.0 and EPRAP 2.0, which will be the one that's launching here at the end of the month.
Great. Let's see. Any questions out there from people who want to jump in? You can feel free or put it in the chat.
I just have another question, if I may.
Sure.
What is the chief limiting factor for these funds getting out into the hands of landlords? I mean, are there folks out that you were not able to help because of some limiting factor?
Well, you know, government is a bureaucracy, and so government can be slow, especially in King County. It's slower than in Pierce County and Snohomish County. But the other thing is that may be relevant towards your question is that there are eligibility rules, not so much for the landlord per se, but I have talked with tenants who cannot get access to some of this federal money because they make their most recent income tax, let's say, or whatever, they make too much money. They're not low income. They make more than 80% of the area median income or 50% of the area median income. And so they, as individual tenants, don't qualify, and the landlord can't help them get the money. But there are probably other sources, not as much, that can help them. But I have talked to people who are struggling with their rent, who cannot access rental assistance.
And I'll say, I mean, I think one of the limiting factors is just the overwhelming amount of folks that need help. And so, you know, I mean, that tends to slow the system down a little bit. They were kind of billing this program as kind of like a pass-through where, you know, the system would give the agency the name, the agency would contact the tenant, they'd check a couple of boxes, and then they'd be able to cut the landlord a check. There's a ton of kind of, the process can be frustrating because A, you got to contact the tenant, and then B, you have to kind of gather the necessary documents, whether that's, you know, just getting someone to sign an affidavit saying that they make this amount of money, or gathering some kind of proof of income or something. And those things always take longer than you think they're going to take. And so one of the most frustrating things in administering that money is we would be on the phone trying to contact tenants and landlords, right? It's on both sides, right? We would finally get all the information from the tenant. We'd have a complete package. We were ready to cut a check. We just need a landlord to sign a document and send us their W-9. And sometimes that would be like pulling teeth too. So it's kind of tying up all those loose ends to create a full package, because at the end of the day, the federal government's going to want to audit that money. So, you know, you have to have all your documents in a row. And on paper, it looks like it should be a simple A plus B equals C. But in actuality, there's always extenuating circumstances.
I'd like to jump in for just a second on that, just because when we did this last year with King County, one of the reasons they had such trouble getting agencies to sign up for this was because every agency had to front their own money and then be reimbursed by the county. So we were the only agency on the east side that participated, for good reason, because, you know, we had to put a whole lot of money into an account and then hope that the reimbursement process came through. And then there was the time, and the window got shorter and shorter. And so the pressure on the agencies to get this out, because there was a deadline by 12/31 originally, it was right at the very last minute, pushed out. But it was a huge burden for our agency to do it. And so we're not participating right now in the second round. We just don't have the staff to do it. But they've also addressed a lot of those issues to try to realize reimbursement does not work. There are not a lot of agencies that are sitting around on hundreds of thousands of dollars, that they're not using to do this. And so they've learned a lot from that first round. They have a lot more money. How much is it now, Greg? $95 million that they are trying to distribute over
I
the next
couldn't
few
give you a
months.
dollar number, but yeah.
So, they're trying to get more and more, and they keep coming back saying, please participate. And it's like, maybe after June, but it was a tough lift. And, but they were not allowed to distribute the money directly. For some reason, the county wasn't. So they had to work through partner agencies.
Hmm.
So, my
Thank
2
you.
cents.
Thanks, Kathy. Let's see. Any other questions? Feel free to jump in. If not, I have one here. So from like a equity standpoint, you mentioned 34% of the evictions in King County were people of color, versus 6% of the whole population of King County, of Black people in King County. So that that unfortunately lines up with kind of the homelessness disparity between the amount of homeless people of color versus the actual population of King County of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So is there anything more to that beyond just it being just the nature of the system in terms of more people being renters who are people of color, so they naturally ends up being a bigger number of people who get threatened with eviction, or is there anything else going on that you could speculate on?
Well,
I know that's not really a tough question.
I mean, from historical, I'm a policy analyst. That's my training. From an historical policy point of view, you have racism, and the racist reality is that there are several racist realities, but just in terms of housing, when this nation was developing a middle class and developing suburbia and putting home mortgages out there to develop single parent homes, they were not making that money available to people of color. And so home ownership is a major source of wealth. And Black people, people of color, were denied access to owning homes. And that's why the majority of them, or great disproportionate portion of them, are renters and not homeowners. I'm not even talking about equity issues involved in employment and education and all this other kind of stuff. It all adds up. And it's going to take a lot of policy work, really, to undo the negative impacts of the policy work that was done early in our history. And that makes me sad, but it's a reality. Fortunately, more and more people are seeing it and understanding it and are appreciating it and making some movements toward reversing. And it is a reversal. I mean, it is, if we do this work, those who have will have to learn how to share. And sharing at times feels like a takeaway. It's, organizations, in organizational management, we talk about change management. Change is hard and you have to manage it. And we have to figure out how to manage these policy changes, which will take some time as well as wisdom to correct.
Thank you.
You know,
That's really good context for how how we got here. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Marilyn.
Marilyn, I want to say I represented banks actually in the 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And redlining, of course, was what you're talking about.
Among other things, yes.
Among other things. It never occurred to me the lasting impact that would have had for African Americans in this country. It's not like something that we can fix now, and now we're going to go ahead and make these loans. That
you can fix it now, but it may take longer than we want. And still, people will feel like they're losing something. And that's why we need to have the change management. It is going to be hard. But we got here because of policy. Mm-hmm. The only way we can change it is through policy. And I say that as a policy person.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, I think we're just about at the end of our time here. Is there any final questions here before we wrap up? All right. Well, I will go ahead and wrap up here. So I want to say thanks a ton to Greg and Marilyn here for joining us today and for providing so much awesome information. I'll send out Marilyn's slides from her presentation here to everyone. And if you have any questions for Greg, send them my way, eric@attainhousing.org, or contact us through the website, and I'll get back to you on that. A couple ways I just wanted to share to engage with Attain Housing here coming up. We have our Seven Hills Shifting Gears fundraiser all in the month of May coming up here. Just like we did last year, due to COVID, we couldn't have our usual Memorial Day bike ride event. So it's a month-long virtual fundraiser. Folks can do all these ride challenges on the Bike with GPS app, or if you're not into cycling, you can just start a fundraising page and just help raise money with your friends and family to support homeless families, support rental assistance, our rental assistance program. So 7hills.attainhousing.org. I'll send that out to you guys in the notes as well. And one more thing, we're always looking for folks that want to do volunteer work parties at our transitional housing properties, just to help out with landscaping and maintenance. We have things where you can come out for 3 hours or so and make a really big difference in cleaning up the properties and making them look real nice for the families that live there. So if you're interested in that, just contact me, eric@attainhousing.org, and we'll get that going. So if it's been a while, or if you're new to the organization, if you're watching this after the fact, please consider donating online at attainhousing.org. And we need your help for our stable home program to keep helping homeless families avoid eviction. So thank you all so much. Thanks again, Marilyn and Greg, and everyone enjoy the rest of your Sunday afternoon. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you guys as well.
Thank you so much for coming, Marilyn. Appreciate it.
Yes, Marilyn, you're amazing.
Yeah, you did great. Nice work.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.